A son steps up as a sidekick. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, DC Rebirth, Robin. Robin is Batman's protege and crime-fighting partner. More than just a sidekick, Robin is an accomplished acrobat, a skilled fighter, and a sharp detective in his own right. Through rigorous and constant training, Robin maintains his physical edge, which along with his knowledge of martial arts, makes him a formidable match for even the most experienced criminals. Although he does not possess any superpowers, his discipline, training, and intelligence makes him the natural leader of the Teen Titans. Before we get a closer look at DC Rebirth Robin, the first thing we're going to want to do, as we always do on this channel, is figure out how tall the figure stands. Should you be interested in picking this one up and you want to just kind of know that information, I'm more than happy to oblige. Taking the tape measure to the very top of Damien's head, we're going to stop it right there. According to what the readout I'm seeing, the figure stands 6.2 inches in height. Switching that to centimeters, revealing that Damian Wayne is 15.8 centimeters tall. Just to put things in proper perspective, let's bring in some of the other figures that we've had a look at in the past, just to kind of give you guys a size comparison. Now, here he is next to what I would consider DC Rebirth Batman. One thing I would say about the figure is I feel like he's a little too tall. I feel like he probably should be maybe right around here instead. That's just my own personal opinion. Also, some other size comparisons. We can bring in one of the Robin minions that we looked at not too long ago. He's about the same height. You could say maybe the hair just gives him a little extra height. The Robin minion is, that is. But the Robins are roughly about the same size to one another. Different builds altogether, mind you. And this particular Robin that we're going to be looking at in this review has better articulation than the Robin minions that we looked at before. Familiar things will find their way to Damien's doorstep here with the accessories that come included with the figure. Familiar things like, for example, the trading card that he comes included with. Although the artwork obviously is different on the front and is dictated by whatever figure that we're looking at that time, I will say that's really great looking artwork. I like the fact that you can see all the Teen Titans reflecting off the blades of the shuriken. That's super cool. Down below, you've got Robin, DC Rebirth, indicating where the character's coming from. And flipping around to the back, further adding on to that, the source materials Teen Titans Rebirth #1, Comics 2016. Real name is Damian Wayne. Down below that, height is 5'6", and a very lean 84 pounds. You know, again, where this is going to be going into my trading card sleeve. To come also include with the figure, whoa, didn't mean to knock the figure down there for a second. To come include with the figure, let's get back on track here. He comes included also with the same display stand. Same DC logo down below. Same peg hole up top left-hand corner. Nothing is different with this versus the other display stands we've seen before. But I was like, in fact, again, the fact that they include these. How many companies, again, can you think of that are currently providing display stands with their figures? There's very few, very small list. Anyways, we'll put that to the side. Coming included also with Damian Wayne, he gets himself a really long sword. Not the broadest of swords, but certainly does make up for it in length. I mean, if you look at the hilt, and then you go all the way across, all the way across, all the way across. I mean, the sword, if you put it next to him, goes to beyond the point of his shoulders. It's a really long blade. But I do like the detailing done to the hilt, as you can see there. This looks like it's been painted rather than the molded plastic due to the sheen. And the fact, of course, this is a different coloring here. I mean, really, the blade could be the silver plastic, and then they, you know, or it could be a gold. But I really do suspect that the hilt has been painted in. Really detailed, nice detail on that. I like the imperfections to the blade, that it's not a clean, smooth-looking edged sword. Instead, you can kind of see like there's little notches and grooves cut into it. So it looks like it's almost been hammered out. Very, very cool. It does fit into his hand, although it's probably not going to be the thing that's going to be displayed with this figure in my collection. But just to show you, it does fit into his hand. Although I will say, like, the hands are slightly smaller. Maybe you may actually work a little bit better putting in this hand. This hand of the two seems to be a little bit bigger. Although all of that is dictated by whether you're able to heat these up, because you probably could if you have any difficulty getting figures to properly hold their weapons. I always recommend really either doing two things: submerging the hands into hot water just long enough, maybe a few seconds, 10 to 15 seconds is more than enough, just to soften the plastic, open that grip just a little bit more. So things like the broad hilt on the sword will be much easier to fit into his hand. Or you can also use a hairdryer as well. I've seen many people decide to use a hairdryer instead of getting the figure wet. So he comes included with that. We're going to go ahead and put that to the side. And then Damian Wayne also comes included with a couple of shurikens. These shurikens, we can put the figure down and hopefully not knocking him over this time around. There we go. It's strange, actually, I knocked him over because his feet are decent enough that the figure generally doesn't have difficulty standing. And yet I had to go ahead and knock him over. But he does come with a pair of shurikens. They seem to be a matching pair as I've overlapped one to the other. These are a case where it definitely looks like they're molded in silver plastic. The sheen on it is just enough that it reflects the light rather nicely without being a mirrored finish. Now you can go ahead and put these into his hand, probably not the conventional way that you would expect. If you were to think, could you put him in this way? I guess you could if you want to. And he does a decent enough job of holding it, although it looks like he's holding it, just kind of looks like he's holding it like a cup of coffee. What you can also do too is if you look at the finger, between the pointer finger and the rest of the fingers, there's like a gap right there. You can take the shuriken, and providing you get the right, there we go, let's spin this around, get that the right way. You can actually fit that in between the fingers, well, at least in between the pointer finger and the rest of the fingers. And you can do the exact same thing on the other side as well. There's that little gap between the two. Just take the shuriken and just fit that, just wedge it in between the fingers. Like that. You probably will want to put it in a better pose than what I'm currently doing right now, but it's more so just to show you what you're capable of doing when you get this figure for yourself, and if you want to display him with the shurikens. So there you go. Go ahead and remove those, put those to the side, and getting a closer look at Damian Wayne. Outside my original and still ongoing issue with this figure being the fact I feel it's too tall. It should be a lot shorter than what it actually is. I think it's a pretty good looking Damian. Maybe, perhaps, if I could really be selected to pick one more fault to this figure, it would be the fact I don't like his mouth. I will say it has grown on me since, but it does give you a little bit more of a cartoon look to Robin. Maybe with that little bit of a poutier face. I will say, though, again, getting this guy to the packaging and spending some much-needed time with him, the mouth doesn't bother me as much as it did when I first got him. I just looked at it and thought, that mouth really isn't working for me. But actually, you know what? It doesn't bother me as much as it did before. He does have really nice rooted, sculpted hair here. Not so much rooted, it's sculpted in plastic. It doesn't have much in the way of extra coloring added to it. In fact, really, when you look at his face, you look at his mask, and you look at his hair, there really isn't a whole lot of extra paint that's added, other than, again, around the areas of the eyes and the mask itself. I like the sculpting of the mask. I also like the fact that the eyes are outlined. These triangular little slivers in white are outlined in black, so they pop a little bit more when you're seeing them on the figure's head sculpt. Speaking of sculpting, I really like the sculpting of his body. I'm not really sure why here, for some reason, it looks muddy. Even though technically it's not. Perhaps it's just a combination of what red they decided to go with and then the yellow with it. The yellow, for the most part, is always generally a problematic color, but here it's not the messiest. I've certainly seen worse figures out there with yellow paint on top of it. But if you look at the side, for example, and you look at the front, the yellow for the most part is pretty good. Yeah, there are a few little areas that you can see the black underneath sort of sticking through. I'm not really sure why that would have been the case. And there are areas, of course, on the side that you can see that red bleeding onto the yellow. So it's not the cleanest. But yet, looking at it from a distance, I don't know why it looks almost blurry to me. And it's not even me just looking through the camera. Obviously, that's what I'm usually doing. I'm reviewing. But even if I look over the camera, it does look a little blurry here. Like, it doesn't look super sharp and clean. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe it may have something to do with the black. The black isn't a very dark black if you compare it to the cape, for example. By the way, I really like the pointed cape. Maybe the black is what's throwing off, where it doesn't look as defined as what it should. You've still got the Robin R there up at the top corner. And he's got a very large utility belt made of several different pockets, all painted nicely. This, in this case, painted nicely in the yellow. The bottom of his skirting, again, very familiar to like the old traditional Jason Todd Robin, who had a little more of the skirting, I think, down below. Now, in this case, he does have black sleeves, And the sleeves then carry on into a green glove. The green is really nice. I like the coloring that they went with on the green, and at least the green is exactly the same green, at least from what I can see with my naked eye. It seems to be the same green as what they've used for the mask. You got the collar of going wrapping. Now this is a different style of Robin costume in the sense that he does have a hood. The hood obviously is not something that you can lift over top of his head. Instead, just tucks behind his cape, and that the molding of the hood is actually part of the cape, so it's all one piece. Speaking of the cape, I do like the sculpting of the cape, how it wraps around slightly to the side. It has a bit of a natural flow to it, and it isn't just a big, boxy, straight bit of plastic, which sometimes capes can quite easily fall into that category. Just a straight, wavy shape of plastic. I do like when they get a little bit more creative with their designs. There's a little bit of also texturing done to the surface of the plastic, which hopefully you guys can see here. Kind of almost has a leather-like look to it, which clearly it isn't. It's just plastic. Flipping it up is always a telltale sign of whether they've rushed the job on the back of the figure. But in the case here, when you lift the cape up, you can see that it's pretty cleanly painted on the back there as well. But again, I don't know. There's something about the red that doesn't look the super clearest to me. Maybe I need to get my eyes checked. A little bit lower down, of course, is where we get a lot of drastic changes done to Damien's costume. The incorporating of laces, for example. I was going to say sleeves. Those aren't sleeves. Laces, as you can see. And again, it's kind of a coloring of like a tomato red. It's not a very vibrant red. It almost even seems to have closer like an orangey red coloring to it. But I will say it's nicely laced up the boots. And of course, as you can see, you've got the additional loops sticking out. A couple of bunny ears there treated to the top. And again, the continuation of that nice green that I was talking about before. I personally like the sculpting of his shoes. I like the fact that these sculpted treading on the undersides of it. And despite the fact that it does disrupt flat feet, it doesn't seem to have a case where I have a figure that's falling over too frequently. If I'm going to just be, yes, knocking him over, trying to grab accessories, that's one thing. But standing him just on his own, like I said, don't have any issues with the figure falling over on me. Checking out the articulation now on Robin, his head rotates all the way around. You would think for all the layers of extra stuff that's going on upstairs here with the plastic that it would limit what you would be able to do with the head. Actually, quite the contrary. You move the head up and down perfectly fine, rock it back and forth perfectly fine. I think probably in a case of this particular Robin, I would probably be more inclined to offset the head, just kind of tilt it off to the side. I do like the look of that. Shoulders hinge out. Just one shoulder's a little tighter on the other one than this one right here, but you can get a 90-degree angle bend. You can move the cape, all the arms all the way around, minus, of course, the fact that, yeah, it's going to be hitting to the top of the cape. But you can, if not for that, be able to move the arms all the way around. Swivel at the bicep, so you can rotate those arms all the way around this way. Single hinged elbow, which actually, when you look at it, it kind of misleadingly thinks, well, I think at least looking at it, like I would expect to see another joint right here. That's not the case. It's just a single joint. You can rotate the hands all the way around. And you can also hinge those back and forth this way as well. The upper torso is very similar to when we looked at the Drowned in the sense that this is all kind of encased plastic. When you put your finger against it, you can feel that it does recess a bit, like you can actually be able to push it in. I think it does result in having the figure with a little bit of torso articulation, but I really don't want to jeopardize that. I would just basically be willing to think that there's no articulation on the figure and sort of just leave it at that. It is an ongoing argument, really, is whether you would take a seamless body to one with articulation. In a case like this with Robin, maybe you could say, well, if this is all sculpted, I would maybe either rather that than have him with an ab crunch. It does, of course, limit what you can do with Robin. Because of that, you can't really do anything. You can't rotate it. You can't crunch the abs, anything. But again, at least you have articulation in the arms, the elbows, and of course in the knees. Speaking of which, the legs do split out. You can bring the legs forward and back. There's a swivel at the top there, basically where that's attached by the ball joint. He has a double hinge on the knee. At least I think he had a double hinge on the knee. No, a single hinge on the knee. I don't know why I was thinking earlier that he had a double hinge on the knee. No articulation here, other than just really the part I already mentioned, the swivel at the top there. And then he does have articulation in the toes. You can move those back and forth and rock them back and forth this way as well. The figure also does have toe articulation, so if that's something that you guys look forward to when it comes to these figure releases, then yes, Robin does in fact have toe articulation. Not a bad looking Robin when it's all said and done. It's nice to always be able to get a sidekick for Batman, and in this case, getting Damian Wayne taking up the mantle of Robin is a nice touch. get him to stand again properly. I just finished joking around that he had some difficulties. He had no difficulty standing. But let's bring in another, just the Batman for, again, size comparisons. The only thing I would really, again, stress on this particular figure is that they probably could have reduced the size of Robin by just ever so slightly. Maybe even the size of his head. If they dropped down the figure by the size of his head and maybe gave him only the height to about where his shoulders start, I think he would be a little bit properly scaled to a regular Batman figure. Of course, all of that is depending on which Batman you display with your Robin. I feel like this Batman being a little bit bigger of the ones that we've looked at is a better suited, and of course, being that this is DC Rebirth Batman, it is really the best comparison to be making with the Robin you can have displayed along with. Normally, I don't tend to bring in other figures for final looks on the figure that I'm having a look at, although I would make the exception, I think, to the rule when it comes to Robin, because Robin, of course, is Batman's sidekick. I really don't want to lock him into a box like that, because after all, he is also the leader of the Teen Titans, but because we don't really have other Teen Titans yet released in the DC Multiverse line, he will be currently displayed along with Batman. Still, again, that talking point about the fact that Robin, I think, is still a little too tall. You can definitely see a lot more of it here when you've got the figures displayed side to side, or at least Batman behind Robin. Robin should have been a lot shorter than what he actually is. Maybe that could be a deal breaker for some collectors that wanted to have a properly scaled Boy Wonder to be displayed with the Caped Crusader. You're really not going to get that, unfortunately, here with Damian. You still get a nice looking figure. Has some limitations, yes, when it comes to the articulation, just simply because they're using that all sculpted body. It does feel like there's a little bit of a soft, pliable plastic over top of it. But if there is supposed to be articulation underneath that torso, you really can't pull it off. You're basically only going to get articulation in the head, the arms, and the leg. He does come included with a couple of accessories here. In final looks, I've just got him holding the one shuriken. A nice touch is the fact that they did put the gap in between the one finger, the pointer finger, and the rest of the fingers, that you can actually slot that shuriken in between. That's a nice way of displaying the figure. Definitely going to be looking to put these guys on the shelf as I see together like this. Until, of course, the time, maybe we will be getting ourselves some future DC Rebirth Teen Titan figures. I hope. If we don't, though, this is going to be the way I'm going to display the figures for myself. What do you guys think of the Damian Wayne Robin from the DC Rebirth, DC Multiverse? I know I'm just throwing a whole lot of DC in there, but what do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you're also new to this channel and you're enjoying all the content you're seeing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Make sure you turn the bell notification on. And yeah, make sure you come back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We still are going to be looking at more of the DC Multiverse figures from McFarlane Toys. So if this is the kind of thing that you like to look forward to seeing on this channel, keep your peepers peeled, because there's definitely going to be a lot more coming your way. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.